Okay, thanks for reminding me, Clara. Welcome, July 6th, Whole Health Forum. Thanks for joining us. Martin Halsey is joining us as the presenter today, coming from Milan, Italy, although originally from North America, from New Jersey. Martin has been involved in macrobiotics for 50 years. Martin is not only has one of the largest macrobiotic centers still growing in the world, but he's also probably the tallest macrobiotic teacher who has ever been teaching in this planet, on this planet. You know, the Japanese who originated some of the practices that we're doing are obviously smaller. Martin, who was at one time a professional basketball player, is still maintaining heights of achievement. And for years, Martin has been teaching online and in person uh, from his center, La Sanagola. And I met Martin in Boston briefly, but I spent more time when he was the co-director of the Macrobiotic Institute of Switzerland, and maybe it was the International Macrobiotic Center in Kiental, Switzerland, outside of Bern. And Martin was teaching, managing, growing this center for many, many years, and eventually moved to Italy, where he has been teaching, had a restaurant, and has a family that have been contributing and supporting his work. I'm sure some of you have seen him before. I'm glad that here's Bill Terra. He's seen Martin before. They were co-directing a macrobiotic center in Portugal at one point in the not too distant past. In any case, thanks for joining us, Martin. We're glad the heat wave is broken, and we understand that the weather is volatile. So if we do lose power, we'll hang on and wait for you to reappear magically through this digital age.
Okay, well, thank you.
What would you like to talk about, Martin?
Nice to be here. Let's talk about the weather. No, it's like the thunderstorms and it's like some sort of you know, final flood going on outside my window. And if it does go blank, it means that the current has gone in my house, and I'll use my phone as a router and get back online. Um, Anyway, well, first thing, you asked me to see if I could find some pictures and introduce myself uh, as a human being, and then go into the topic for tonight or today. It's 6 o'clock where I am, which is about. This is a presentation I've done a couple of times about how we age. Well, that means how macrobiotics is aging or evolving, and how macrobiotics has changed in the way that we present it and in the way that it's practiced. And then also how we age individually. Many of us have been doing this for many decades, and over the years, every now and then you realize, well, I need to change what I'm doing because it's not working so well. So it's kind of
Lenny, there are people in the waiting room that aren't in. Can you see them? Ruth, Hirsch, and Christina. Okay. Sorry, Martin.
I'd really prefer that people turn off their mics. We can communicate through the chat. I mean, a lot of people becomes very confused. Actually, I'll put it on the chat here so that anything we can see, we do on the chat. Let's see. I'm not really no, I don't know what you're saying, but I'm always confused with Zoom. I've been living on Zoom for the last 5 years, but I'm still confused by it. Anyway, let's get right to it, if that's okay. And I did this presentation in English, mostly in English, for a group in Holland and Belgium. So this is me and my wife. Is that showing up good?
Yep, it's great.
Okay, so
Perfect.
that's our cooking school. You saw that cooking school, Lenny?
Yep.
We once had one of the biggest macrobiotic schools in the world. It was big lecture hall, big auditorium kind of cooking school with, video, and we had a restaurant at the same time. On the weekends, we would have 70, 30, like 160 people there, either studying or eating or whatever. And then COVID showed up. So the cooking school has moved physically to Bergamo. Bergamo is about a half hour from Milan, and the rest of our courses are online. I have an office that I use in Milan a couple of days a week to do counseling, but otherwise, the center was basically blown away, like a tsunami came through. Um, so many people ask me, why did you stay in Italy? I came over to Italy as a basketball player, and basically never left. There's me as a basketball player.
Ah,
He was big and strong and handsome. Demonstration how all things change. Um, that's many, many years ago. So from there, I graduated. I often say I mastered in basketball and I got a degree in biology. So I graduated with a degree in biology, and I decided to come to Europe and play basketball for a year. I wasn't good enough to play in the NBA, but in Europe there was some pretty good teams, and I came over with a team of all-stars. Anyone who knows anything about basketball, Robert Parrish was on the team with me, or I was on the team with him. And we came over, and as I got off the plane in Italy, in Milan, I met a guy who started talking to me about macrobiotics. Literally, as I put my feet on the ground, this guy who was our uh, our translator and guide through Italy, an American guy who had been in Italy for a number of years. And it was kind of a destiny because I'm still in Milan talking about Michokushi. But the real reason I'm still in Milan is this woman standing next to me here. And it's interesting, she's actually standing on a box. So, she's not very tall. But anyway, she and I built this center together. It became, hugely successful. I mean, I mean, it's hard to explain how many years we just had waves of people coming through our courses, and mainly due to the work of my wife, Rosie. Her name is Rosie. Our school's training program is still recognized as a valid profession where people can open up their, I don't even know how to say these things in English, but anyway, they can be officially taxed, things that work that way, as a macrobiotic counselor. It's like a real legal profession due to an immense amount of paperwork and bureaucracy, all done by my wife. So that's part of me. These are my three girls a number of years ago on Lake Como. We have a house up on Lake Como, which Lenny also saw. And we go out on the lake sometime. This is a few years ago. This is Christmas recently. So it's me looking very pale, and Milan doesn't get a lot of sun. And then my girls, there's a girl here on the right, Sophia, she's like a clone of Rosie. She was somehow cloned, although she's much taller. Then the girl, this is Helen with the Santa Claus house. She's my oldest. She just got her degree in ancient Greek and Latin. Wow. And now she's studying archaeology and go to these archaeological sites and translate ancient Greek and Roman. And she's going to study, anyway, she's a real brain. And this is my youngest, Fiona, who's going to start college next year and study biology. So my degree is in biology. So that's my family. There's another picture. The year before, when we had our dog, we lost our dog this year. So that was, dogs become part of your family. And this is our home where Lenny also was in our home in outside of Milan. So that's my human side. Is that good, Lenny? You asked me to do that.
Yeah, that's great.
Uh,
I know.
my life
You're a
is
family man.
my life is extremely Italian. All my girls are Italian. My dog was Italian. My mother-in-law lives below us. My debts are in Italy. Everything is Italian in my life. And So that's me in a very short time. I came to Italy in 1976, so it's actually 49 years ago. And some things are just destiny. I don't know how to explain them. And yeah, I just do better in Europe. I have tried to come back to the States a few times over the years, but never really worked out. I do better in Europe. Okay. Um, this is another picture that I like a lot with two of my best friends, both of whom we lost last year or a year and a half ago. Many of you probably know Lino. Lino spoke Italian. Lino was born in what was Italy at the time. And he would come over twice a year to Italy for these events. We would organize events. We would organize events that last the whole summer for a number of years, but often we would just go off for a few weeks. And Lena would always come, often with Jane. If we were lucky, Jane would come. And me and Lino spent a whole lot of time together. And then this is Vittorio Calogero. He's like these are both my older brothers, although Vittorio's significantly shorter than me. And we worked for years together in Switzerland, in Chiental, and he basically participated in any event I ever did until his health failed him a few years ago. And that's my second daughter, Sophia. Her head is as big as Vittoria's at that time. Anyway, I thought I'd share this. So many of you, I'm sure, know Lino or knew Lino. Miss Lino. I talked to Jane the other day. He's the only guy you can miss. Oh, that's me with Micho. Micho's not standing on a box there. He came to Milan basically every year. I mean, I worked with Micho when I was in Switzerland, in Chiental. He would come and spend weeks at a time. We really had a great opportunity to work with Micho, get to know Micho and Aveline. Aveline was great. And then he would come to Milan every year, and we'd have these big events sponsored by the city. Really had some nice times until 2006, and he stopped coming to Milan, I believe. Anyway, that's my connection to macrobiotics in a way. So this is a presentation I wanted to present. Aging with macrobiotics, how macrobiotics has changed over the past century and how our practice must change and evolve, especially as we age. That's the concept. So Lenny, you probably have some clarity on some of the things that I'm going to present here. It's almost like folklore. Just to go through kind of the history of macrobiotics quickly. And it's very Japanese, obviously. I think something that needs to be recognized is the enormous contribution of these Japanese pioneers. I mean, and it's still deeply within macrobiotics, this Japanese aspect. In Italy, it has become very Italian, and I'll explain that as I go on, because Italy is a country that has a traditional diet based on grains, beans, vegetables, fish, even seaweeds. So it easily can be adapted, macrobiotic principles can be adapted to Italian way of eating. But there is this heart and soul and spirit of Japan. So this is Ishizuka, the doctor of, I think it was in the army, and Osawa was healed from tuberculosis by his dietary approach to disease, which was simply to go back to traditional Japanese way of eating based on whole grain rice, miso soup, really Japanese traditional diet over many, many centuries. I don't know much more about him. Do you know much more about him, Lenny?
Mythic.
Mythic, yeah.
Mythic hero, yeah. He worked as a barber for a while, and barber shops, the clients always tell stories, and so he was able to develop his diagnostic skills working with his barber clients as he felt their head, saw their face, checked their hair, and heard their stories, their health, their relationships, everything about it. And for a while, according to Bill Dufty, he also worked as a ticket salesperson at a theater and got to see thousands of people who came to buy tickets. And that was part of his reason for doing it, was to develop his diagnostic skills.
I knew you would know about that, Lenny. Anyway, then from that source came George Osawa, who I never had the pleasure of meeting. I got into macrobiotics after he died. I have some recordings of him, of his voice, which was quite impressive. And my interpretation, or how I understand, the Izizuka was based more on almost biochemistry and just use of traditions. And George, over time, realized that there was this basic polarity operating with sodium and potassium, and started using the traditional, not really the traditional, but the idea of polarity as expressed by yin and yang. He revolutionized or changed the use of yin and yang in macrobiotics as compared to Chinese medicine. So then he started applying this principle, the unique principle, and his theorems and principles and laws, and in every sector of life. I mean, he redid the periodic table. He redefined, the body. He talked about astral travel. He thought nuclear war. He just applied his principles throughout his life to everything, and particularly to the importance of diet and health. So, I think anyone who's in macrobiotics knows a lot about Osawa. I think he wrote 360 books or something, and slept 4 hours a night. He thought sleeping was a waste of time. Really mythical characters. These are just an unbelievable energy and idealism and charisma. These are people who went through the war, and came out on the other end looking to create peace and constantly talking about love and health. Really incredible people. His students, well, I luckily had the good fortune of meeting many of his students. This is something I find interesting. The 10 diets of Osawa. Osawa basically defined macrobiotic way of eating through 10 diets, going from -3 to diet number 7. And it's interesting. I find that he used diet number 7 as kind of a brief fasting situation, and basically was open to almost any number of ways of expressing macrobiotics as long as there were whole grains and vegetables. Fairly large amounts of animal food at a certain point. Then his student, one of his students, main students, is Micho and Aveline, who I had the good fortune of knowing very well. Spent lots of time traveling with Micho and talking. When he was in the right mood, you could ask him questions. And he was often in the mood to just go off on, all kinds of arguments and leave you with, your mouth open. He has such a wide range of interest and ability to interpret. Aveline was great. I really loved Aveline. She was really a wonderful woman. So this is where my background comes from, and most of macrobiotics in Europe anyway, I guess in the States as well. Micho was a huge figure in the States, together with Herman Ihara, another great guy. Oh, anyway, this is Micho's then synthesis from the 10 diets. Micho sort of synthesized it down to his standard way of standard macrobiotic diet, which we'll talk about in a minute. Then, of course, there's then the big boom in Boston. I guess you were in Boston at that time, Lenny, when this book came out, and there was this incredible wave of interest for macrobiotics. Were you there at that time? I'm sure you were. Are you there, Lenny?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Tom Monty had to resign from being the editor of the Vsauce Journal in order to complete this book. And then it was excerpted in one of those magazines that doesn't exist anymore, Saturday Evening Post. And that article was shocking in terms of its notoriety about macrobiotics. Oh my gosh. It was no longer the diet to change the world. It was the diet to cure cancer. It was no longer the diet that's killing our kids. It was the diet that's saving our life.
Right. It's interesting. My sister, I come from a big family. I have four brothers and four sisters. And one of my sisters worked at the hospital where Satilara was was a resident. So there's this kind of strange connections to all these things. And yeah, so anyway, this is all kind of the history of macrobiotics is what I'm trying to present here, where it comes from the Japanese connection, then, how Osawa was presenting it in his sort of spirit, and Micho and how he evolved, how it evolved and became more palatable or clear for Western people to use through the standard diet. Then this boom that was a phenomena also for Denny Waxman. This was a major thing throughout his whole life. The fact that he played such a big role in this book. And Denny just became very famous. Denny was another guy I knew very well. We were partners together for a while in Portugal, and just lifelong friends until he unfortunately passed last year. So this is one of the points I want to make. And what happened is, I think that, Micho, or when I went to Boston, I lived in Boston in 1977, 78, in a study house, and took every course possible, imaginable. Micho would do these lectures in this, what was it called, the church there?
Arlington Street.
Arlington Street Church, and there were weekends, and but basically he was just proposing Japanese diet. We were all being introduced to the miso soup and gomazu and takwan, and it was incredibly effective. I think what happened was that Micho and these macrobiotic teachers from Japan, they came to America and said, these people have no idea how to eat. There is not a long-standing tradition of a healthy diet here. Just the people are unbelievably unhealthy with a just incredibly bad diet. So we'll just introduce Japanese diet, which is incredibly effective in let's say stimulating change. Well, I think that macrobiotic diet, particularly based on brown rice, use short grain, pressure cooked brown rice with miso soup and gomazu and root vegetables. It's like taking a sponge and squeezing it, getting all the excess out. And it's just incredibly powerful. And sometimes, too powerful, creating various symptoms of what we used to call discharge, elimination that was too violent. But that was, macrobiotics with Japanese diet. And in some places it still is, and I have nothing against Japanese diet, but this is something I want to talk about once you sort of create this sort of background. So just to make a little synthesis, everything changes and Western teachers are changing the way macrobiotics is practiced. In Italy, there are many different schools and approaches. There are 3 or 4 different schools of macrobiotics. For a while, there was one really big movement. I don't know if you heard about this guy who it became a big scandal a few years ago, Mario Pianese, this sort of charismatic figure. It became kind of a cult, and then he got arrested. I don't know where he is now. I think he's in jail for tax evasion and abuse of minors or something terrible. Anyway, that was a big school of macrobiotics. Punto Macrobiotica was his group. Mediterranean macrobiotics. There are at least 3 different schools of macrobiotics in Italy called macrobiotics. Then there was the school of René Lévy, who many people went to his center in France, and he has a fairly strong presence in Italy. And then the continuation of Micho's teachings adapted to modern Italy, which is what I'm doing. Micho once said, Martin, you need to change Italy. I think he probably told that to about 10 people, but I sort of have carried the torch in some way. And then there are many schools and approaches throughout the world that grow out of this fundamental Japanese style. Let me just see what I have here. So I'd like to make a couple of observations at this point. One of the most important, I think it'd be interesting of students of macrobiotics, is how traditional diet grows out of a climate. And Japan is fundamentally different from Italy. And I'm going to use Italy as an example because that's where I've been living for most of my life. Italy in the summer is hot and dry, except tonight where the sky has opened. But it's a very dry, hot climate, particularly in the south of Italy. Whereas in Japan and most of the Orient, it's wet, it rains. So the needs and the traditions that have grown out of those climates are very different. So that macrobiotic diet drives, like dishes like kimpira and pressure cooked brown rice and gomasio and lots of root vegetables are drying the body out quite a bit, which is useful if you're living in a very damp climate. Whereas here in Italy, it's completely different. Like southern Italy, they use a lot of raw oil. I think Micho would turn over in his grave if you talked about using raw oil. But they put olive oil on everything and a lot more fruit, a lot more fresh foods, which is just a reflection of the diet. The base of the diet here is bread, particularly in the South. So people would take bread and they would dry it and then eat it with raw oil and tomatoes or, other things, oil and garlic. So over time, the Japanese macrobiotic approach ran into problems. And during the 1970s and 80s, there was a huge boom in macrobiotics in Italy. There was a big association, restaurants all over the place. And then gradually it was kind of dying out. And, I feel it really has to do with the use of macrobiotic principles in an improper way. The idea is not a diet, it's about principles that guide your choices in diet. And so my way of teaching macrobiotics is very, very Italian. We use as many Italian dishes as we can. We use Italian herbs and traditional condiments, including some of the really unique Japanese foods like miso and soy sauce, but not really a whole lot.
Would you say that again, Martin? You said it's not a diet, it's about, if you could elaborate just a little bit what that means. I know
Okay.
you're going to do it by example, but what did you mean by principles?
Macrobiotics, excuse me, is I'm probably going to speak half Italian as I go forward. Um, it's not a diet. It's the use of principles of balance to create a diet. So there's some basic principles of diet, which is that whole grains and vegetables. Oh, let's look at the pyramid. This is Micho's pyramid. So this can be interpreted in an infinite number of ways. It doesn't say here short grain brown rice cooked in a pressure cooker. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say necessarily that you have to have miso soup. It doesn't say you have to have seaweeds. Well, it does have seaweeds. No, it doesn't even have seaweeds. I took seaweeds out. People were getting freaked out when they saw seaweed, so I took it out. So to really properly apply macrobiotics, you need to understand how diet and environment are united. So it's out of your environment that your diet is created. Let me give you an example. Let me just come out. I'll interrupt this. I think everyone knows about the many years ago. This is a phrase that comes up a lot as we get older. Many years ago, a woman came to our center in Milan, and she was an organizer of a big Tibetan Buddhist community on Lake Lago Maggiore, big lake in the north of Italy. And she said, the Lama wants to speak to you. There's this very famous Lama. And the Lama calls, you got to go. So I go up the mountain to this group of Tibetan Buddhists, and the Lama explained to me that he understood the importance of diet and how he had to include diet in the teachings of Tibetan Buddhism. And the idea is this, that in Tibet, there were 4,000 meters with very little heat, and they created a certain diet that's in harmony with that environment. And it's based on grains, vegetables, and beans. They eat barley at every meal. They eat lentils. They eat cabbage and vegetables. But they eat it with fat. They eat it with, butter, and they put butter in the tea. They put butter in the barley. They eat meat and a lot of fat because they need to heat their body, need foods that will help them to live in that environment. So they created this tradition over many thousands of
ちょっ
years.
と待ってて。
Then
じゃあ、ラップして入れとい
Chinese
てくれ。
came. The Chinese came and they had to escape. So from Tibet, they escaped and they went down into India, subtropical India, where the diet is grains, vegetables, beans, but not with lots of butter and yak cheese, but with lots of spice, because spice cools off your body. So what happened, and his explanation or his reason for wanting to talk to me was that a number of the monks developed, clogging of the arteries, and some of them died because they maintained their traditional Tibetan diet in a climate that was totally inappropriate. So that's the concept, and in a more extreme example. So Italy and Japan have this fundamental difference. They're both. You can look at Italy and Japan, and there are many similarities in terms of longitude. They're pretty similar. They're both surrounded by water. They're both fairly short people for the most part. They have a wonderful food tradition, but they have four-season climate. But one of their main differences is that it's hot and damp. It rains in the summer, and in Italy, it's hot and dry in the summer. So it developed completely different traditions. So over time, it has become important for people who, maybe were introduced to macrobiotics or using macrobiotics with great success for a number of years, that they started to develop problems as time went on because it was too Japanese for the Italian climate. So what I'm saying is that we use macrobiotic principles to create a diet that is appropriate for an environment, but not only for an environment, for your age, we're going to talk about that in a moment, and your lifestyle. Okay, is that clarify?
Great. Yep. Thank you.
And I think it's very interesting for particularly for macrobiotic students to see that. It's not that the Japanese diet is appropriate everywhere. It's appropriate in Japan. And even places very similar. Japan and Italy are very similar. They have great rice in northern Italy. It's a wonderful rice, big rice fields everywhere. You drive through rice fields as you go east and west in northern Italy. But the climate is just so different. Okay, let me go back to my presentation. So again, this pyramid can be expressed in many ways. And the way that we express it and increasingly express it is as Italian as possible without losing the real power of, I say that macrobiotics transforms your body. Eating whole grains, vegetables, is transforming you. If your body is tight and rigid, you eat the right way, your body becomes more relaxed and elastic. If your body is weak and your tissues are losing form, you're kind of experiencing problems of anemia or weakness, you transform your body by the proper use of macrobiotic principles. So that to me is what macrobiotics is. And as much as we would like to make it as Italian as possible, it needs to maintain that transformative capacity. I hope that's clear too. Okay, let's go forward. There's a couple of other points here I think are very important. Back here, not a week goes by that I don't see someone with cancer. They're literally, except maybe during the month of August when everybody closes down, but there's not a week goes by that I don't see someone in counseling who has either had cancer or has cancer or is going through chemotherapy or whatever, just on the basis of this book. That's how powerful that book has been. So Satilaro is, Italian as well. So that's Italy is always involved. Antonio Satilaro would be his name. Okay. Love Japanese cooking, love Japanese food, but day to day in Italy, it's not always what is most appropriate. Okay, many ways of, there are many books about macrobiotics. I need to change most of the books. Micho, who is brilliant, incredible. They're dated, they're dated. They're from the 1970s often. 1980. There's been a modern trend towards more vegan eating and the science of nutrition that, we're in trouble. We're sort of in a downward spiral around the world from a time, again, I know more about Italy and Europe, but from a period of time in the 1980s and early 90s when macrobiotics was really growing, there's been a kind of downward trend in most places for certain problems. And again, I think part of it is, this overly Japanese approach, which is appealing, to some, but not to, not to everybody. And that this sort of vegan, new ways of eating, new diets that are really quite good have come along, and they're just real easy. Macrobiotics is hard. Macrobiotics is difficult for people. To change your diet is difficult. Then you learn about yin and yang, and then you have to figure out all these recipes and new ingredients. So, I think that we really need to think about how to make macrobiotics as easy as possible for people. That's a big theme of what I've been teaching the last year. Make it easy for people. Don't have to start with the most difficult approach. You can go step by step, include whole grains, get rid of meat and sugar, add some new things. Just make it as easy as possible because it's just hard. I think that's the main problem with macrobiotics. I don't know about other people's ideas about why we don't have a much wider audience. Because it's incredibly effective. My other point about macrobiotics is that it's just incredibly effective. I don't know any of you who maybe doing counseling, but if somebody has like migraines, just sit down and I'll tell you your migraines will go away, in a matter of weeks or months. You had type 2 diabetes, sit down, it's just going to go away if you can practice this. Or just so many problems, so many health issues that are just easy to get rid of. That's just incredibly effective. I think that maybe if anyone who's involved in macrobiotic teaching or has been involved in centers, yeah, I'm not talking about degenerative disease, which, again, macrobiotics gives great benefit for degenerative disease, but just this wide variety of things that people suffer from, not sleeping, anxiety, pain, skin problems, digestive problems, diabetes, all these things they just go away most of the time with a very basic macrobiotic practice. With you have to know what specific points to emphasize or to avoid. But despite this incredible power, it's not growing as it should. Somehow it's just not. That's my feeling. Maybe as I'm getting older, I'm thinking like, wow, I don't have that many more years. I can't. Why are we not penetrating society in a more effective way? And I think it's just hard. The language is difficult. Whereas like vegan, oh, I'm vegan. Well, you don't eat animal food. It takes 3 minutes to describe it. Someone asks you, would you define macrobiotics for me? It's like, do you have a half an hour? It's not that simple and direct. You can try to make it simple and direct, but then the people are going to, may or may not get it.
So in Italy, when you introduce it, do they still think that it's a Japanese-based diet? They're not aware that you're recommending the traditional Italian diet?
No, I get to that point right away. I said, well, we're using Oriental principles here that have been around for thousands of years, and as using Italian food traditions. It's just so easy, that's not really difficult. So it's like really uniting all the centers used to be East-West East-West centers, East-West foundations around the world. And that's what it ideally should be. So that's fairly easy. I've done thousands of lectures. It's hard to think about how many thousands of lectures to groups around Italy I've done over the years. And it's kind of a starting point. We have this unique, very simple to understand principle of balance that we're going to apply as, to Italian way of eating. And it has all these benefits. That's kind of a way of starting out.
People think about Italian cuisine, they think about butter, dairy,
Cuisine.
cheese, and tomato sauce, at least in the South, and pasta. How does that relate to what you recommend?
Well, again, I think that's a very good example. Let me come back onto the full screen here. And I don't have a map of Italy right on hand. But Italy's down, it goes down like a boot, it goes down to the southeast. And there's a point where the Apennine Mountains, cut across, and they divide the Great Northern Plain in the south. In the south, they don't use butter. It doesn't exist. My wife's family, my wife lived briefly in Puglia, the heel of the boot, and they moved north, and they had never eaten butter. It just was not part of the diet. They had never eaten chicken. That was not part of the diet. They do have certain kinds of cheeses, but they were very secondary. So in the south of Italy, all those really heavy lasagna and those kind of dishes, those are more relative to this northern, I don't know how to say it in English, the Pianura Padana, the Po Valley, the Po River. The Po River goes from the farthest western point of Italy right across to Venice, and it creates this incredibly rich plain, just incredibly powerful nature, and not casually. Again, I'm having trouble with English right now. All the big cities, there's just big city after big city after big city. This really rich part of Europe is all on this Po Valley. And the Po Valley is wet and cold in the winter. It is wet and cold. I remember when I came over, you would drive in the north of Italy in the winter, and you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. I mean, it was just this thick fog. It's changed over the years. Things have been, you still get thick fog, but it's just this cold, damp climate. So people developed the use of um, fatty foods, like risotto is made with cheese, or butter is the main cooking oil in northern Italy, and like in where Parma is, like Parma is, I always say it's the land of the enemy. Um, Parmigiano and prosciutto, all that comes from that area, which was traditionally a very poor area. People had a very poor diet, so these very fatty foods were used sort of as condiments, and relative to the climate, and not foods that were eaten in the south. Then you get to the mountains, where the very northern part, and there you have all these um, aged meats and cheeses, but still with eating grains. I think Italy is the country where they have more variety of grains, I think, than any other country in the world. You start in the very northern part of the mountains, right near where the house is there on Lake Como, where you were. And they have a pasta that's made from buckwheat, pizzoccheri. They make a traditional dish. And polenta. They have polenta that's also made with corn and buckwheat. So then you move down into the Po Valley Plain, and for thousands of years, the main grain was millet. And they made polenta with millet. And then Napoleon came and he bought and transformed the agriculture using corn or maize, and that became polenta. But still, millet is very well known. Then you get into central Italy, and then you have like barley and farro, farro soup and barley soup. Then you go to the south, and I make fun of my wife. I say in Puglia, in the very southern part of Italy, they have four grains. They have pasta and bread, and then they have bread and pasta. That's all the grains they have down there. But they have lots of them. They have really good grains. Then you go into Sicily, and they use like couscous. So there's a great grain tradition throughout Italy, and the diet was just poor. This was a very poor country. Actually, again, I could go on and on about Italy, but Mussolini, as terrible as he was, just modernized the whole country and drained swamps and brought in all these new technologies, but it was a dead poor country. So let me show you something, Lenny, I think that you'll find interesting. Very pertinent to what you just said, which I tend to show to people. Let me get to it here. If I can find it. Oh, no, I didn't. Did I not put it in here? Oh, no. Okay, well, I had done a version of this that somehow I didn't add. All right, I'm going to need to go and fish out a...
Well, you can tell us.
No, you have to see it's a graphic that is absolutely speaks for itself. 1 second. It was right after this. Should have been here. No, I guess I missed it. I'm always arguing with Zoom. So 1 second. Let me just get back to you, because the diet has changed so much since the 1950s that what
But
seems
tomatoes, I mean, since the Spaniards brought them back from South America, I mean, tomatoes part of Italian cuisine in the South, at least?
well, let me go there. Tomatoes, I think, is not that big a deal. Let me just show
It
you.
was for Osawa.
Yeah, well, again, that has to do with the situation in Japan at that time. It was almost
Right.
they weren't dealing with huge excess of animal food. So anyway, here we go. Let me see if I can do this. Let me zoom in and share the screen. Here it is. So this is animal food consumption in Italy from the 1950s until 2015. And there's not even cheese here. If we were to add dairy foods, it would go off the screen. So, what traditional Japanese diet, Italian diet is very little animal food.
What are these colors?
Yeah, so it's like this is shrimp and fish, and this is chicken and pork and beef, each one. And then
I see.
I have some other graphs, but it would take me a while to get them out. So again, when you talk about Italian traditions, it's not what people are thinking. Those are modern traditions that have to do with food industry and new technologies that allow you to just produce huge amounts of meat and cheese and things that were at one time more like condiments. Cheese was more like a condiment than a food. It was just like thickening agent. And and this graph is very important for a number of reasons. Number one, to understand what is real, what are the real traditions of Italy. And number two, to realize that the books, macrobiotic books and teachings of Osawa or any teachings from say 1970 was a point of a lot of ferment and things coming out of macrobiotics. Well, since that time, the amount of animal food people are eating has tripled or quadrupled. So we have to compensate for that. Macrobiotics is about making balance. It's about making balance with your environment. It's about making balance with your past. So if you've just eaten huge amounts of animal food, I tend to think like diet number 7 is not a good idea. Or, restricting or limited amounts of vegetables or eating too much grain or a very young diet. You need to eat a diet that helps to get rid of, move that heaviness. That's the real challenge today. Together with the fact that, you illustrate to people that what they think is traditional Italian cooking is not traditional. Okay, am I making that point clear? So, tomatoes, it's just not that big a deal, honestly. And well, again, I could go on and on about these things. When tomatoes were introduced into Italy, what they did with their sort of wisdom was to dry them, salt them, and dry them in the sun. That's the most traditional use the first use of tomatoes was salting and drying. My wife talks about this when she was a baby. Her grandmother, who had 24 children, to give you an idea about the kind of vitality that they had, would have all the kids help to turn over the tomatoes in the sun. They would be salted and put in the sun. So how's that for like intuitive ways of balancing very yin food? So anyway, my point about as macrobiotic ages is like, again, things have changed so much, even from the time of Micho. Times have changed. Around us, people are talking about vegan diets. Around us, people are becoming more and more aware of the science of nutrition. Diet is not what it was, particularly in Italy. I don't have statistics in the States, but I imagine.
考えないから眠くなっちゃうんだよね。入ってくるだけだからなんだよね。
So
Somebody should be muting, please mute.
and so the diet today needs to encompass all those things to make it as easy as possible for people, to allow people to come in, like not have to make it really difficult. They don't have to speak Japanese to begin doing macrobiotics, you know. They can use their traditional dishes. Misha one time told me, the further south you go, the harder it is for people to change. It's more northern people in the north. You can look in terms of, social change, women's role in society, and all kinds of social evolution is more in northern countries. The further south you go, it's the role of the women, or not to talk about, Arab countries here. But it's true. When I get people, I have a whole following of people I see on Zoom. I do a lot of counseling on Zoom, and I'm laughing because if you get someone from Sicily comes and they're like, heal their headache, you're going to see their brother, their sister, their cousin, their postman, and they talk. Southern Italians, they spread the news, and all of a sudden you become like the family expert. But if you, to introduce to them something that they're not used to is really difficult. So I have them eat pasta fagioli, eat foods that and be careful about, whether it's tomatoes if they have certain problems, or lots of raw oil if they have others. But to make it as Italian as possible, because it's just too hard otherwise. They're not going to do it, you know? Then as people get benefit, they open up. They become a little bit more, open to, well, let's try this. This is a food that, or do a cooking class and see if you can try to learn about. I mean, people in the southern Italy, they don't even eat polenta. They don't polenta. That's for the north. They don't even want to talk. Are you kidding? We're not going to eat polenta. Um, yeah,
But everybody eats pasta.
everybody eats pasta. Although pasta was not so prevalent in the north. Pasta is made from durum wheat, hard wheat, which grows in the south. Whereas in the north, they eat rice. Like did you meet my mother-in-law, Lenny? No, you didn't have that pleasure. Um, anyway, her husband grew up. He's from Lombardia, Lombard, and this is where they have the rice patties, and they ate rice 3 times a day. That was what was available. That was what was cheapest. Pasta was in the south, and now it's all mixing. The things are more. There's more pasta in the north and more. Well, they don't eat rice in the south. I'm not going to eat rice in the south either. So anyway, it's a little bit more complicated than what people think about Italian eating, and very much related to the climate. But unfortunately, just excess. Italy is second in the world in infant obesity, because they just introduced these foods, all this sugar and fatty foods, with the idea that they're following, a traditional diet, but it has nothing to do with the real traditional diet. It's just what everyone else is doing. That's something about Latin culture as well. People tend to do, well, they don't want to be different so much. That's a little bit more difficult for people. Okay, I digress happily. Okay, let's go back to this presentation and try to get a little bit of synthesis here. We're going all kinds of directions. Okay, so that's my wife, that's me, that's my girls, our dog, aging with macrobiotics, story of macrobiotics, Osawa's 10 diets, Micho's standard diet.
There was a restaurant in Paris at one point, a macrobiotic restaurant that had only 7 options, and it was 1 through 7. That were the only choices on the menu. It was a macrobiotic restaurant in Paris.
Was it the Bol Bois?
Yes, yes.
Oh, yeah, I know that. Japanese diet. So again, Japanese diet in Italy would only be for the really avant-garde type of people. You have to make it as Italian as you can. And luckily, Italy. I think Italian way of using macrobiotics could be very good in America or other countries, because the climates can the north of Italy is very cold and it snows and whatnot. In the south, it's more hot and dry. You can get all kinds of traditional ways of eating related to climate. Okay, so I'm saying that we want to change macrobiotics. I'm trying to make it easier, change the language, use as much as possible Western traditions, Italian traditions on my hand, understanding that we need to compensate for this incredible amount of animals. That's why vegan is so popular. You know, people, they just come to macrobiotics and they're just loaded with excess of meat, cheese, eggs, and they just feel so much better not eating it. Over time, I think that that's, you know, it can be difficult for some body types. But you know, but lots of our students are vegan. Vegan is very popular. But you know, with macrobiotic principles and learning to cook and make food stronger, and vegan way of eating becomes, you know, perfectly valid, interesting way of eating. I wrote a book. It's on our website called Vegan Samurai. I think I actually did a presentation 4 or 5 years ago. It should be on.
Ah,
Forget
I
not.
think it is. I think it's on the YouTube channel.
Yeah, which is again like just say, okay, vegan is great. We can all kind of get on board with the idea of not killing animals and not polluting the environment and all the negative things connected with animal food. But you need to do it in a way that makes you really strong. So that's the idea.
Ruth has her hand up. If you don't mind, we take a question from Ruth.
Okay.
Ruth?
Was that me?
Yes.
That was an accident. I'm walking and I guess I bumped it by
Oh.
mistake. I'm sorry about that.
Okay. Sorry.
Thanks, though.
So I think there are two major concerns for the future of macrobiotics. That is, we do not lose its essence. We tend to try to make things, there are a lot of vegan kind of diets, interesting diets that are based on the science of nutrition. You know, like Dr. Greger or Dr. Campbell, the Chinese thing, the China, I don't forget what it's called.
China study.
China study and different diets around. You know, there was McDougall who died recently, more in the States than anywhere else. And the risk is that we just forget about yin and yang and forget about, you know, this whole Oriental uniting East and West and just try to make it all science. I heard someone talking about science-based macrobiotics, which I think is just absolutely inappropriate. If anything, we should have macrobiotic-based science, because you just lose the essence if you do that. Then we really do need to become much more effective in gaining a new audience. Otherwise, we're just not going to be relevant. We're all just going to be irrelevant. There's a generation of teachers, of which I'm one, that we're just going to fade off into, you know, go to the beach and hang out. And it's just going to die out. So we really do need to create an emphasis and become much more effective at attracting a new audience, but without losing the essence. So what is the essence of macrobiotics? And we could talk about this all afternoon, but as taught by Osawa, the essence does not change. I'm saying the diet needs to change. The way we communicate it needs to change. Our understanding of, you know, environment and past diet is just using his principles better. But Osawa was fundamentally about that we live in a spiritual universe, and food is spirit. You know, our mind is spirit, and our mind is God playing. It used to be, you know, life should be play. So the purpose of life is for our mind to discover its true nature. So that's like the levels of judgment. I think if George Osawa wrote 360 books, I think 359 of them were on the levels of judgment. He was constantly on about that, which is an understanding of, you know, growing and evolving our consciousness to discover who we truly are, and that everything grows out of the infinite. Here's a nice little graphic that a guy did for me. Everything comes from oneness, right? Oneness, polarity is born. Yin and yang is just an expression of, we live in a world of opposites, of polarity. And polarity gets grouped into, you know, expanding and contracting tendencies. That's macrobiotic understanding. Then yin and yang combine to create energy. Energy condenses to create pre-atomic particles, light and fire and, you know, elements. Then the elements are born. Then the vegetable kingdom is born, and then the animal kingdom is born. And all of this is in constant communication, never separated from, and eternally divine, eternally spiritual. There's no separation. There can be no separation of any part of this spiral of creation. This is the George Osawa spiral of creation. Is an understanding that we live in a spiritual universe, that our body is spirit, our food is spirit, and there is a purpose to life, which is growth, to realize our full human potential and freedom. That life is play with George Osawa. So I think that is an essence that easily gets lost when because we focus on problems, we focus on migraines or skin problems or cancer, and if people, that's why they come. That's where a large part of our audience comes from to begin with, and a small proportion, really discovers this beautiful philosophy. So we can't lose that philosophy. Otherwise, it's just going to become a mechanical approach to vitamins and minerals and supplements and all that sort of stuff.
Does it conflict with the Catholicism that's also prevalent in your country?
Not at all. No, not at all. Most of my students are Catholics, Some of
I would
them
imagine.
very religious. Italy is a funny country that way. The vast majority of people are Catholic or Christian. And the second largest group is Islam. And the third largest group, which is really big, is Buddhist. A big Buddhist community. There's a tiny Jewish community, tiny, like 30,000 people or something. It's a ridiculously low number if you can think about Israel and the United States. So there's really no conflict with, it's East and West meeting. It's East and West. I think that was a really well thought out way of presenting macrobiotics back in the day. We use these Eastern concepts of non-duality. I mean, this can become very philosophical. Non-duality, which we used to talk about. I remember studying with Bill Tara back in the day. Bill, we would spend days talking about, dualism and, the essence of macrobiotics in that sense. You can't spend days talking about that now. Students just go south on you. Anyway, to me, that's, again, macrobiotics comes from Japan. It comes from an environment, a place where there was very little animal food, where the problems were yin. There was like infectious disease. George Osawa had tuberculosis. Beriberi was epidemic, and macrobiotics grew out of that. So it was very young. Then it came west, and Micho kind of opened it up. But it needs to open up even more because that graphic I showed you, this tendency towards ever more amounts of animal food is just increasing. It's not decreasing. I hope that's clear as a point. To really observe that. An interesting thing about living in different countries or spending time in different countries is you can start to observe how food is affecting many aspects of diet and as well as personality. I remember when my kids, we first came to America when they were little children. They came to, and I would go to my sister's house. And my sister's husband was a great guy, ex-Marine, really big guy, really, first line Vietnam veteran, and eats lots and lots of animal food, like most Americans. So my little kids, my little girls would say, "Can we have some water?" I said, "Go ask your uncle, go ask your uncle, get if you can have a glass of water." So he would bring back this huge tumbler full of ice and water, And the girls would look at me and say, "Dad, I just wanted some water." Like ice was not a thing. Ice is not a thing in Italy. No one has ice. So even coffee, if I go to the States and have a coffee, say, give me the smallest coffee that you have. It's just huge. Because there's so much animal food, there's so much yang that people need all this yin. You notice that when you live in a country that doesn't have all that yang. Although Italy's changing. They still don't have ice. They don't put ice anywhere. Anyway, I'm sure you've observed that around the world, Lenny. No?
Yeah.
It's a typical compensating for this huge amount of animal food. Okay, now how about as we are? Here's Herman. Herman had a very nice expression. One time I was in Geneva, and one of my other incarnations in macrobiotics, I had a tofu company. I made tofu in tempeh near Geneva, and Herman came with Cornelia, and we were at someone's house, and people wanted to ask Herman, please tell us what is spiritual development, and because Nietzsche was always going on about spirit world, and Herman was just much more sort of down to earth. And he expressed it, I'm sort of paraphrasing, that we accept the physical limitations of our body to realize the infinite nature of mind. That there are not infinite ways to balance the body. Like you can't just eat a piece of wood, you have to respect your body's limitations. But there are infinite ways to realize your spiritual nature. Macrobiotics works with physical limitations, with the understanding that food is spiritual and our physical body is also spiritual. I thought it was a really nice, clear answer. So that this physical discipline, the discipline with our food and discipline with our lifestyle is about opening ourselves up to an infinitely many ways of discovering our true nature. Very nice guy as well. These guys were great guys, Herman and Cornelia and Micho and Aveline and Shizuko. These were just fabulous people. Fabulous people. I know anyone who did. Yeah, did you meet all those people, Lenny? I'm sure.
Yes.
Yeah, they're just fabulous people. I feel very fortunate to have known them. Okay. So macrobiotic spirit of non-duality, our connection with the infinite source of life, a path of spiritual growth, and it's also in harmony with Western spiritual traditions, including Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. I in my work in Italy, I have no problem. One of our cooks, we had a cook at one of our restaurants. I've had many restaurants over the years as well. Was Muslim, Mohammed, good cook. And he became fascinated with macrobiotics. We used to talk about the connections between Islam and macrobiotics, about this kind of physical limitations and discipline, and he had no problems with it.
Now, it looks like there are a couple questions now. I don't know. Does Ruth, do you actually, yes,
Yeah,
Ruth
this
actually has
is a
question.
real one. Sorry, it's a little bit off what you're talking about right now, but I have a question about protein, and I'm the opposite of a meat eater. I mean, pretty much vegan and occasionally fish when I feel desperate, but I'm almost positive I don't get enough protein because I don't have much of an appetite for it, so I just wanted to ask about that for those of us.
We're going to go into diet in a minute. It's not really what I'm focused on right now. I would like to finish
Okay.
this part of the presentation. Then we'll
Okay.
talk about
Okay.
eating and
And
eating.
there's one other question.
Yeah.
Manucha?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what you had up there that Herman Ihara said along that line of spirituality, something that George Osawa wrote first in Japanese in 1940 and later in his English translation in the 80s, that he wrote about entering the infinite world where the small I doesn't exist. When we free ourselves for the ego emotions arising from our finite existence, we find ourselves in the vast domain of the infinite. And I think that this is a basic premise of macrobiotics, which should not be left behind. But in this world of chaos and confusion in not only physicality, but spirituality, it's something maybe that has to be adapted, that myself as a religious Jewish person living in Israel, I have a lot of connection to the Torah and to this ability that has nothing really to do with food. I worked with Mishu. I ran a study house years ago, and I found that even more important than physicality is the attitude. People can eat perfect macrobiotic diets, and they can be their attitudes, regardless of what they eat, can really make them sick. And someone
Great. Okay.
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 Again,
Thank you.
we got a half hour, and I'd like to get to the.
Yeah. But thanks, Manucha.
Okay. So clearly, this is the predominant spiritual nature to macrobiotics that needs to be maintained. That's sort of the message. Then, it is important to maintain the essence of macrobiotics even as things change. So what's the future of macrobiotics? This is more macrobiotic practice, and here we can talk about protein and the more practical side of it. I hope I made some points that were clear and useful to people. What is the level of judgment of modern people? This is George Osawa's way of understanding how people make choices. So most people have a mechanical approach to diet, where they want to fill their belly like a car, and that they have a feeling of well-being. The taste and the appearance of the food is good. You know, so they can eat and they feel okay when they eat it. They don't think about, well, how I'm going to feel tomorrow or how I sleep tonight. I ate it, I digested it, I'm okay. And then an emotional side to it, being accepted, being loved, following traditions, motivated by fear and emotions we can be motivated by hope and optimism. So most people, and again, I'm not talking about many of you who are perhaps long-term macrobiotic practitioners. I'm talking about uh, reaching a whole new level of society, becoming relevant. I think we're very, very much at risk of just becoming irrelevant very soon. So this is a conversation about, okay, there are those of us that who have understood and studied and met all these charismatic people and dedicated, but we're not going to be here very long. And macrobiotics may just leave with us. So we have to find a way to communicate with a much larger public. So people have, they're more about feeling good. They're more about, let me eat food that I like and just very mechanical approach, very sensorial approach. So that's how we need to present it, I think. I'm not going to talk about, eat this food for your third chakra. Eat this food because it's going to make you digest better, or, we need to. So we can combine sensory and emotional aspects to share macrobiotics. Cure diseases, people are motivated by fear, by pain and fear, which is both sensory and emotional. Make us look younger, make you get beautiful skin. I have a presentation, I said, make your skin great again. It's one of the first things that people notice, and it's very motivating. It must be delicious and well presented. Food really needs to look good. In the past, macrobiotics very easily just become sort of brown. Communicate optimism and hope instead of fear. Don't try not to motivate people with, oh, we're all sick and the world is going to, share joy and enthusiasm. I think that whole atmosphere of macrobiotics needs to be created. And it was something that I think that we did really well in Milan, particularly because of my wife. We just created this very normal environment. There wasn't sort of alternative. There were, just normal people with a very clean and bright, Lenin Usvar Center. It was very and modern, and it wasn't anything alternative about it. All of our teachers were just, normal. I keep saying normal because macrobiotic people in Italy and in the past were alternative. They were pioneers and oftentimes a little bit strange. um, so I think we have to show ourselves to others as, we're just normal people. I got debts. I got my mother-in-law I got to deal with. I got kids. I got, and this is just going to make you feel better, look better. And it's easy. It can be easy. You really have to find a way to share this. I think it's fun. Otherwise, it's just going to be completely irrelevant. Okay, oh, here's the chart again. I knew it was on here. I'd like to just talk, we don't have a whole lot of time, so I'd like to talk about as we age. So I started macrobiotics, I was 22 years old. I was a professional basketball player. I was big and strong. I was even handsome. I weighed 220 pounds, and I could digest rocks, you know. And I came to macrobiotics, like it was a mess the first year. I had no idea what I was doing. And then I went to Boston and I studied and I got involved with, macrobiotics on a big scale. And for a large part of my life, just really felt great and ate a wide variety of foods. And then I started to get a bit older and I realized that, I was starting to have some health problems that were very unusual. I started to have some pain. I started to have some stiffness. Started to have some sleeping problems, like, things that just were completely new to me. And I hadn't fundamentally changed my diet. So, and then talking with people, I talked to Lino and Denny and a number of friends I would contact regularly and says, well, we're getting older. As you get older, you become more young. your body becomes stiff, your body becomes more dry, you know, you become more young. So your diet has to compensate for that. It all depends on when you start the diet as well. But let's say someone who's been macrobiotic for a longer time, as you get older, you know, it's just not the same. So let me see what I'm doing here. So most people are not born macrobiotics and need to balance their diet on previous conditions. This is something interesting with my daughters. My daughters were born macrobiotic, never ate meat. They wouldn't even consider eating meat. And one of my daughters can't even eat eggs. She's allergic to eggs, so we have fish, you know, once in a while. But most people have to compensate for this enormous amount of animal food that I pointed out previously. You have to improve weakness and health problems from the past. For this, I suggest special diets in the spring and the fall. We can maybe do that at some other time. And for people to go step by step. This is like a beginning way. Then there are different phases of change. Our body goes through phases of change. This is in Italian. This is one of the graphics I use in Italian. But it takes about 3 years to get fundamental change in your nervous system and your endocrine system. And there's a constant sort of process of elimination. Okay, profound changes take place. The time about 5 or 6 years where we're kind of confused about who we are. It's the half the part of your body is made from like meat and sugar, and the other half is made from rice and beans. So you're a little bit confused at 5 or 6 years. Then, as we get older, my observation, this is just my suggestion, is that young people need more oil and fruits and less animal food. They're just young, you know, they don't need much animal food. They can become much more easily vegan. They need to keep whole grains and vegetables at the basis of the diet, particularly children, because that's what's helping to build the nervous system. The nervous system, your immune system, whole grains and vegetables are the key. And for harmonious personality growth as well. And these are all issues that we can go into about when people eat lots of meat and cheese and eggs and chicken, they get all tight and it makes you anxious and it gets you crazy, you know. This good, simple macrobiotic practice, I think people's personality, I've observed in my children, they just, you know, kind of cruise through all the little crises of adolescence and whatnot much more easily than I did anyway. I think older people need richer food, more fermented foods, and less cold foods, more good quality sweets, foods that keep the body moist, less salty and dry food. Sugar just destroys the mind. You know, sugar is one of the main causes of Alzheimer's and mental decline. Physical activity is absolutely fundamental. I think that they need more protein, you know, to go back into the protein issue, because the enzymes, everything about us as we get older becomes less effective. We just don't have that power in our digestive system, we don't have that power in our physical body. So we need to make the diet richer with simple things. I'm like a very big proponent of tofu and tempeh, these vegetable quality foods that are rich. They don't make your body tight. The problem with animal food is just going to clog you up. Most people have eaten enough animal food for 4 lifetimes. So it's not about, no, so we need more fish or we need more eggs or we need more, no, right? You know, and if you enjoy having those foods once in a while, that's not even the issue. It's more about day to day, what's going to make you feel better.
So when you say rich, you're talking about protein in that case, or what are you
Oil,
talking about?
mainly oil, but oil and sweets and protein.
But when you say sweets, but you say no sugar, what do you mean by sweets?
Macrobiotic sweets, fruit, you know, barley malt, rice malt, good quality sweets. You know, those are we have about 30 basic cooking classes at our school for our diploma. This is a diploma program. And the ones that are most frequented are the sweets. Macrobiotic sweets are really good. They're relaxing, things that keep your body relaxed and moist. You know, sweets turn into moisture in the body. That's another thing to observe. Well, again, I could go off on tangents here, but like the more hot and dry a climate is, the sweeter their food is. Like you go to North Africa, they're eating loads of dates, figs and dates. Also in Sicily, the sweets in southern Italy are just so incredibly sweet because they help to keep the body moist in a very dry place. So good quality sweets can do that as well as not so good quality sweets.
And in fermented food, are you are olives considered,
Yeah.
is that one
Olives,
of the ferment?
olives, again, in Italy, there's long-term traditions related to fermented vegetables, particularly where lino came from, the Northeast. The northeast of Italy, they have a huge tradition of pickles, like lacto-fermented pickles, brine pickles, that have sort of gone out of favor over the years. Sauerkraut, the Austrians had taken over all of north of Italy for a while, and you could, sauerkraut was traditional. So that's what I mean, like lacto-fermented brine pickles. Olives are made in brine, and they're fine. I think they're great. There's lots of different kinds. They can be used in many different ways. They're rich in oil, so again, good quality oil. But fermented foods, like miso as well. What I think that needs to be, or it's useful to maintain from Japanese foods, are these incredible condiments, miso, shoyu, umeboshi, because there's nothing quite similar in Italy or in the West. They just really help your digestion.
Do you eat natto in Italy also?
I do, but it's
You
not.
can get it or somebody's making it?
You can't get, I make it. Yeah. I think natto is a wonderful food. That's a very good example of something for people to eat as they get older, if they like it. Natto is wonderful. Yeah. Soy foods in general, traditional soy foods, I think are really good. Tofu, tempeh, even soy milk made, properly, are good things for good quality oil, good quality vitamins and minerals, um, rich, easy to digest. So then there's another thing about women in menopause. That's a big thing. It's like women, as they come into macrobiotics, if they can really apply the diet and get themselves prepared a few years before menopause, they can go through a whole different phase of life than what most women experience. So that's part of getting older.
And what's the preparation?
Well, again, menopause is a time in life when suddenly a woman loses her ability to eliminate yang. A menstruation is just old yang. Every month, the woman brings the heavy yang blood to the uterus, and it just is eliminated. The endometrium, and then suddenly that can't happen. It happens. It starts to begin a few years ahead of time. So suddenly, a woman becomes much more young, and there's dryness, and there's heat, and there's nervousness, and you can't sleep. All these very yang signs. So the thing to do is to start to eliminate yang. That would be a good time to become vegan a few years before menopause, or eat very little animal food, and to use soy foods again. Soy foods, the plant estrogens can substitute for human estrogens to an extent, and relax the body. It's time to help the body to relax. So that's done with also various kinds of home remedies. It depends on the situation, but you can get ready, and if you have a couple of years, you can avoid the just horrible symptoms of menopause. So that's part of an aging process that's different. So I think, just as basic ideas is to realize that the macrobiotic diet is not a diet, and it changes drastically according to environment and your personal needs and your personal age. And all these things, you got to put them together. So if someone changes their diet, like when a woman comes to me, I remember I had this phase where I had all these women who are already experiencing very powerful symptoms of menopause coming for counseling. And I'm like, wow, I don't know how quickly I can help you. And I used to take them to a local acupuncturist or the Chinese herbs. And I asked Micho. Micho was in Milan one time. I said, Micho, what do you do in those situations? Because you don't have months to change. Your diet takes a little bit of time. You have to, food changes your blood, and blood changes your tissues. And Micho said, the first thing he said to me, he says, well, in Japanese language, the word for hot flashes doesn't even exist. I said, that's great, Micho, but that's not helping me very much. Which means that the traditional Japanese diet was not very rich in animal food. And then he gave me some ideas. He said, he suggested some things to me. There's, there's some dishes, classic dishes, I have to think in English again. A pot of snow, do you know the pot of snow dish? Where
Nope.
you take tofu and grated daikon and you cook it together. It's really effective for hot flashes. Or soy milk can be very helpful. Black soybeans. Um, there's different. Micho was always very generous about that stuff. He'd give you all his experience and help you out. But it's more about having a few years to help the body to relax, and it's very much connected to the liver, kidneys and liver. So you can try to work on those organs. Okay, well, do I have anything else here for you? I'm a big believer in special diets. Let me just come out and talk to you. I think it's totally unrealistic to expect people to become macrobiotic and follow all, very strict guidelines every day for weeks and months. People just can't do it. They have a social life, their kids, they go to church, everywhere. They're bombarded with bad food. And so you try to get people to come as close as possible to, like what Michi would call a standard diet, which to me has to be a little bit changed, more vegetables, less grain. But people are just not capable of practicing really well all the time. So I introduced about 10 years ago, maybe more, what I call the fall diet and the spring diet. And these are periods of time during the change of the season, your body is encouraged to change. As the environment changes, your body changes. So it's a time when your body is already in kind of flux. And if you can follow a very simple diet and help the body, you can make great progress in a few weeks at those times. And it allows you because people are not going to become very strict over Christmas. They're just not going to do that. People are not going to go on holiday and just stay in an apartment and cook brown rice. People, during the year, people do the best they can. But if they can twice a year, and I recommend a minimum of 10 days, a maximum of 1 month, to do a very simple diet with lots of grains and vegetables. I'm always into lots of vegetables. I think diets without vegetables are not a good idea. And the really strong yin and yang food. So to avoid totally animal food, to become vegan for 10 days to a month, which anyone can do, and to avoid baked food, hard baked food, as well as little vices. Some people like to drink wine every night, or some people have coffee every day. Well, for a brief period of time, get rid of it, and you make great progress. Your body just changes enormously in a very short time. And it's slightly different in the spring and fall. In the fall, the body is going deep inside and strengthening. In the spring, the body is opening up and eliminating. So you can sort of use recipes and remedies to coordinate with those times of year.
You're focusing pretty much on, I mean, we only have, we can continue to the next 30 minutes, but you're focused mainly on diet and food preparation. Are there other aspects? I mean, that is one of the issues I feel. You asked about what are the limitations of macrobiotics and its lack of adoption or popularity. And people think about it as a diet. And would you were an athlete and you were a fisherman and you are a hiker. What do you would say are the other factors that you haven't discussed so much that contribute to a healthy well-being and evolving spiritual understanding besides food or besides physical food?
Well, it's diet and lifestyle. Macrobiotics is about diet and lifestyle. So you have to have contact with nature, just exposing yourself to nature. But I really think that the sort of spiritual side to it is very personal. If someone's very Christian or very religious in one way or another, there's not a problem with that. I think that their ability to understand and get to the real heart of the tradition that they're following is going to be helped by macrobiotics. And food is spirit. And I don't think you really need to make that separation. I think a big problem with macrobiotics as a diet, because Osawa was very clear about this. It's really food is the key. Let's be clear about that. It's not just a philosophy. But then, challenging yourself, a dream in life, searching out difficulty, Osawa was about that too, dream in life. But we have great difficulty communicating with the scientific world, like doctors and nutritionists. They just don't get it. That we're just like poo-pooed. It's like, well, it's like not serious. And a lot of that is due to just physical tightness. If your pancreas becomes very contracted, everything you doubt everything. It's just, oh no, that's just that's charlatans. That's just that's stupid. And you can't. There's no way of getting through that. Okay, but if that person changes their diet and starts to relax, and their pancreas starts to relax, they open up. They don't have to meditate or do yoga, and I'm all for the meditation and yoga. But there's a very powerful effect of just eating. Also, the whole connection between the intestinal flora and the mind, the creation of serotonin, and there's all these connections that have your physical health has a tremendous effect on your mental health. Then I think each of us has a path, and that path can be more spiritual, that path can be more social, that path can be more artistic. I don't, again, the way that Herman described it, there's thousands of ways you can develop in life. There's one way to make your body strong and healthy. That's through, discipline and understanding the dynamics of life. Then, like Osao and Micho in particular, and, these great macrobiotic teachers, there is a beautiful philosophy behind it. I don't think it's a starting place for most people, and it was at one time. Again, all these are arguments that we go go into for quite a while, but maybe we talked one time, Lenny. There's an important English historian, Arnold Toynbee, who once said that the most important event of the last century was not space travel or all the technologies, but it was the Buddhism encountering the West. So it's a kind of the East and West encountering each other. This whole worldview that's so different, so opposite. And I think that macrobiotics was one of the first movements to take all of that value of the West. It's kind of a synthesis of Oriental thought, of non-dualism, of body and connection to oneness, our relationship to the universe. And it was just, for guys like me, I'm sure like you as well, and many of the people here, it was just incredibly fascinating and charismatic as a way. But you met these really charismatic people. But since then, all these different ways of expressing that have arrived. There's many different schools of meditation and yoga and Tai Chi and Qigong. And so we don't have that, what's the word I'm looking for? Monopoly anymore. It's kind of a monopoly of macrobiotics at the beginning. So our appeal to the world and the value that we have to the world is to help them transform physically. As they transform physically, they transform mentally. And everyone has their own path. I have my own sort of spiritual practices that I've developed and used over the years that are very different from anyone else I know. It's not one way. So, that aspect of it is not, I don't think it's an easy starting place when you want to get people interested. And there's just no doubt that in macrobiotics that the food is fun.
It's just to see that the yin yang includes the physical and the non-material, the thinking as well as the doing, the activity as well as the eating. And some people would say the yoga of cooking is a yoga, or the meditation of cooking is a meditation practice.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We
in our school, we also had Michael Rossoff had taught lots and lots of courses for us. So the whole invisible body, digital acupressure points, understanding chakras and their connection to the meridians, But again, that's, you know, I don't think it's a starting place for most people.
How can people stay in touch with you, Martin? Is it possible, whether there's people from all over the world on this call, uh, i- is is there something that you're doing that would be of interest to English speaking people or available, or your books
Well,
are all in Italian, right?
yeah, I've written over 20 books in Italian. I have literally thousands of registered videos on our website. There
In
are
Italian.
in Italian, yeah. Actually, I have 3 books in German. Um, I used to teach a lot in Austria, and a guy translated some of my books. No, and it's kind of a big frustration in my life. I've never been able to really relate to the English speaking world. I've appealed to you a couple times, but never really made it. And you know, the fact is, I don't think people realize Italy is a really big country, 60 million people. There's a lot to do here, so it's not like there's a lack of work. But it
No,
would be,
but as one of the foremost macrobiotic teachers and people interested to continue this conversation and get
yeah.
guidance.
Well, you know, one of my dreams is to do. I do what I call a macrobiotic fitness club. Every Wednesday night, there's a presentation, a lecture. And you have been on it. Bill Tarr was there. Danny used to participate. Uh, you
So
know,
people can sign in for that and they can do the subtitling in English if it's
yeah.
Zoom.
No, I think you would really. I would like to do it in English. I could do an English version of it.
Uh-huh.
And I need to, you know, there's a kind of administrative infrastructure that's needed. You know, you need to be able to um, put out, you know, it's a big deal. The management side of it, which luckily my wife takes care of everything.
Is she doing cooking classes online, or is anyone in your
Oh,
school do?
my wife does not do class. She's not a teacher. She doesn't like to teach. We have a cooking school that does all of our cooking classes are you can follow them in person, you can follow them directly online, or they are recorded. And are actually you should contact Laura. She was an English teacher, so her English is really good. And she had cancer twice. She came for counseling and we became, you know, she did all of our courses and she's just you know, beautiful, charismatic woman, great cooking teacher. And she's carrying on the cooking school side of our
So
course.
people can participate online, but again, it's all in Italian.
On a time. So the idea and one of my desires is to create something similar in English and do it together with Laura. So we could sort of alternate between cooking classes in theory. Because there's so much, you know, there's no diagnosis and there's the science of nutrition. And then there's, you know, home remedies and there's dealing with all different kinds of problems. Last week I talked about dealing with parasites. And then, you know, then sometimes I talk about, a couple of weeks from now, I'm going to talk about dealing with low blood pressure and problems in the heat. There's infinitely many things to talk about. And every Wednesday, I call it like a study group fitness club. So every week you get, you know, you like work out your mind a bit. And I give people things to do for a week. And they all receive the recording of the class. And I could very easily do it in English. I have hundreds of presentations. It's just that infrastructure that's needed. And I'm still hopeful. Maybe we can work something out.
So it can be Lasana Gola is the primary way to stay in touch with you, to go to the website, or
Someone wants to be in contact with me, and I do have a series of articles and stuff in English. If they would like to write me, you can just write me at info. I'll put it on the chat. Uh, info at La Sanagola. La Sanagola. I'm sure no one has any idea what that means, but La Sanagola means the healthy throat. And it's kind of an idiom in Italian. When you talk about the throat, it means like it's almost like um, sins of gluttony or too much pleasure. It has to do with pleasure. So this is like the healthy pleasure is the name of our cooking school translated. So lasanagola.com. And everybody speaks English. My wife speaks English. You know, I get if anyone's interested, I can connect them to a series of articles I've written, or if anyone's interested in counseling, I have some materials I can do. I've seen like 10,000 people in counseling in the last 30 or 40 years. Yeah, it's, I realize that I'm sort of isolated over in Italy, and the English-speaking world is a whole different world. Um,
And if you're interested in the succession of macrobiotics, the success and succession, who's going to follow? It may not be an Italian person. It may be a South American or a Mexican or
yeah, who knows?
Canadian, and they have no way of connecting with you at the moment. Maybe they do now, but studying with you, I guess, is what I mean. So,
Yeah, I've tried, Lenny, and I'm going to try again. It's just,
okay. It's like the Dalai Lama looking for his next incarnation. It may not be in Tibet. It may not be in China as much as the Chinese would like it to be, their monopoly. And so where's your next incarnation?
well, I'll tell you, we've got a lot of people teaching and counseling in Italy. I mean, our school has turned out, it's hard to describe how many students have gone through our school. We went through like 20 years of just booming courses full and diplomas and, this official, geez, I can't even speak English, recognition. So in this course that I do every Wednesday, there's a lot of people who are doing counseling, who are teaching in their local areas, who are involved with women's groups or whatever. There's a lot of people who are growing out of our school. It's not like that's going to just fade away. But I think Italy's an exception in that sense.
What about your summer camp? Is that over?
No, I haven't done a summer camp since COVID. And we're going to begin this fall with the weekends. Paul Lambeth is coming to Italy. Paul Lambeth did a course, I think, with Gwinnett. Um,
Summer camp would be great. There you would get a lot of foreigners to come and participate.
I did it for years. I mean, if anyone knows that Bill, if Bill is still online, we did this thing in Link. Link was, I guess the first one was 1984 or 85. And from that year on, I did summer events every year. And for a number of years, I did 3 months, which was insane. I would never do that again. My wife, would divorce me in a minute if I suggest that. But then I brought Lino over so that Lino could take over some of people would just wear you out on vacation. So I said, Lino, take care of him. Lino was he was just never get tired of people. He was an amazing guy. But who knows? Again, we're not that young anymore, and that kind of energy that we had 20 years ago is different. And thank God for Zoom, because it just allows the work to continue and to reach ever growing numbers of people. But to run around Italy, I used to do 1,000 kilometers every week in the car, just going different places and teaching and doing lectures. It was just nuts. I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't do it.
Take care of your family.
Yeah.
Does anyone have other questions? I know there's been a few.
About protein, I don't have a word to say about protein. I think it's hard not to get enough protein. Protein is everywhere. If you eat enough food, it's hard not to get enough protein. I think John McDougall, who died recently, was a very interesting vegan nutritionist. And he pointed out that protein everywhere. The problem might be in being able to digest it, to be able to prepare and digest food so that you get all the protein. But really, protein is everywhere. Just, grains are rich in protein. And again, I'm much more about this idea of richness. So like oil and creamy foods, but not sticky. Like tofu. I think tofu is a great food. Tempeh is a great food.
You still making tofu?
No. No, my wife gets on me about it, but that was another incarnation. That was best. But yeah, I don't recommend tofu because I'm selling it. I used to sell it. I will tell you a story though. In 1981, I did a course in London built with Belterra, and that's where I met Michael. And after that, I opened a tofu company, and I started making things in Geneva. It was nuts. crazy macrobiotic adventures. I didn't speak French. I had no idea how to make tofu. I said, well, I'm going to go over in Geneva. I'm going to make tofu and make a business. That kind of crazy energy and optimism and confidence you had at that age. And macrobiotics was just like inspiring at that time. It still is, but you had more energy. So I found out about tempeh. I didn't know tempeh existed. So I went up to Holland. Holland was the only place in Europe where you could get tempeh because Indonesia was a Dutch colony. And I found a guy who was an Indonesian tempeh maker. And I brought him down to Geneva, near Geneva, and I had him teach me how to make tempeh. And I started selling tempeh. And then when we opened the hotel in Quintal, I taught it to hundreds and hundreds of people how to make tempeh. Hundreds and hundreds. And it started spreading out all through Southern Europe. And one day I was with my daughter, and I used to put her in the shopping cart, and we're in this supermarket. And going along, and I see tempeh. They have tempeh in the supermarket. And I'm like saying to my daughter, I said, Helen, my daughter's name's Helen, Helen, this tempeh. And she looked at me like, yeah, Dad, we eat tempeh all the time. But it was like, after years of having introduced tempeh, it had penetrated into the, big supermarkets. So I think that's what they're going to put on my tomb when I die. He introduced
So instead of Johnny Appleseed, you are tempeh seed or something.
tempeh. He
Martin
introduced
Tempeh seed.
tempeh to Southern Europe. And, but anyway, I think those are really, really important foods for modern people. The key to macrobiotics is making your body strong, get great strength, but don't make your body tight. All this meat and cheese and eggs and baked food is making people just tight, and they're uptight and they're nervous and they're anxious and they don't sleep, and and then they're eating huge quantities of stimulants, and so macrobiotics has to compensate for that. And it's not about lots of grain. It's about grain and vegetable, but cooking styles and presentations and proportions that give you strength that you need, but help the body to relax. And there, yoga, shiatsu, any kind of body work is wonderful to help yourself relax. I get treatments every 2 weeks. I have a friend who comes to Milan. I get shiatsu treatments just to keep your body loose. When I studied with Bill in London in 1981, you had to study shiatsu. We would do doing together. You had to study cooking. You had to study macrobiotics was all of that, And now it's kind of gotten compartmentalized. There are schools of shiatsu. There are schools of, whatever, the various disciplines. And when I opened our school, it was a school of cooking. It was just cooking. But then it expanded into healing. There's a healing, so like macrobiotic theory and diagnosis and use of remedies and whatnot.
There must be other restaurants that have taken over since you closed yours in Milan.
Not, I think there's a few. The thing about Italy is that you can eat well almost anywhere. You're not going to get necessarily whole grains, but traditional Italian food cooking is very easily vegan and it's very easily based on grains, vegetables, and beans. Macrobiotic restaurants are really difficult. It's one of the toughest businesses, and absolutely, I've had 6 in my life, and I'm not going to have any more. It's
I've
like
only had 3.
you've been invited. It's a tough business. You have to get the highest quality materials, which cost more, and then people are used to a certain price range for foods, and they say, "Well, you're giving me rice and beans. Why is it so expensive?" And it's like hard to get that across.
When
Tough.
Sinai was opened in Boston on Newbury Street, a bowl of rice was 50 cents and it was unlimited refills.
Yeah. Well, that's fast, man.
Jane, did you want to say anything before we go? You're a longtime friend and associate of
Hey,
Martin
Jane?
Halsey.
Here I
Oh,
am,
hey,
Martin.
how you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you. We're
Oh,
still digging out from the Asheville flood, but other than that, I've got my friends here in Asheville, like Lenny and Becky, and my friends from Florida. People have been very, very wonderful to me. So,
that's great.
but Martin, some of my best life memories were the many summers we spent with you and Rosie and the girls.
Yeah.
Usually you always picked a great spot, whether it was a cabin or
you know, uh, a beautiful house in Tuscany. You always picked beautiful locations, and they'll always be some of my favorite memories. We had a
Yeah,
great time.
every year we go places.
And Lino, those who don't know, Lino was my partner and husband, and he and Martin had a great camaraderie
Yeah,
and just great, really very good memories. And I loved your lecture today.
thank you.
I feel the same enthusiasm and have had many of the same philosophical um, changes in my mind about macrobiotics and how to make it better and to improve it as we age.
Right.
But I think across the board, people adore the Italians, and I've always treasured my time there. So thank you, and give my love to Rosie and the girls. Okay,
I will do. Thanks. It's nice to see you.
thank you.
Always a real pleasure to have you when you came.
Oh
You know,
yeah,
there's something really great about Italy when COVID was everywhere and like there was thousands of people dying here in northern Italy. It was the hardest place hit in Europe. It was a big deal. And people got on the balconies and sing. Just incredible.
we saw that. We saw they would play the violin in the
Well,
evening.
like in our apartment building, some would say they would call it a flash mob. There's a flash mob at 7, and everyone from the whole neighborhood would be out, and they'd sing these, simple Italian volare or whatever it is. They prohibited me from singing, but that was. But it was amazing. It was just, there's something really beautiful in that, and yeah. So Italy has a lot of nice qualities. I
And
can't
So,
haven't managed to get away. I've been here. I've
I'm
been.
so
convinced that the reason that Italy was hit so hard with COVID is that so many tourists came there from all over the world
Could be.
to enjoy the country and the art in the early stages when they didn't even know they were carrying it. And I've always thought everybody loves Italy, so let's go to Italy. And I think that's why it was hit so hard. And I'm very sorry you had it so hard there.
Yeah, it was really heavy. Like they had to get the army to take off cough. It was terrible. It was just terrible, terrible situation. And but that reaction from the people was so beautiful.
Yes, yeah, the spirit, the Italian spirit can't be beat.
Then,
anyhow, we
COVID.
appreciate oh, go ahead. You had something else to say?
I was just saying when COVID was finally over, it was like, ah, and then Russia invades Ukraine. It was just like, what?
I know.
Just, it's just, no, this can't be. We can't get back to any kind of normalcy. And it's just nuts. Anyway, that's the world today.
Anyhow, we want to acknowledge you, Martin, as one of the pioneers, one of the bearers of the torch, still carrying it. Hopefully it's not a cross, but it's just a torch,
No, I
leading
enjoy that.
people.
I
Martin is, if people don't realize, how tall? Six what?
Well, I used to be 6'9",
Ah,
2 meters,
so now you're 6'8"?
2 meters 4. Well, they say you get smaller as you get older. I haven't checked out,
Uh-huh.
but
Like I said, Martin is not only the largest macrobiotic center, but he's the tallest macrobiotic teacher now and maybe forevermore. And we're glad everybody could join us. There will be a recording of this, and I'll post if it's not already. It'll take a little bit to get it up on YouTube. And we really appreciate your experience, your wisdom, your insights, your support, Martin. Everybody who could join us is here, and we'll hopefully have hundreds more watching your presentation on YouTube. And
okay.
he did put up his contact information, the healthy throat,
A
but
healthy,
not the beautiful singer, although there's some great singers from Italy,
yeah.
as we know. Great music.
All right. Well, listen, thanks, Lenny. Nice to see you. And thanks to all the people who tuned in. I hope we'll be able to find ways to connect in the future and do like an ongoing study group. I really believe in
Yeah.
study group kind of idea where you bring teachers in from different points of view. All macrobiotic teachers have different points of view, different opinions. And I think it's good that they get aired. I always say if you ever get confused because there's people have different ideas, I'm always right, so you don't have to worry about it. Anyway,
Great.
we'll see.
Okay, if anybody wants to continue, I'm not sure if there's a continuation
Yeah,
among the participants, but thanks, Martin. If you need to have dinner now,
Yeah, I connect with my wife.
yeah, okay,
Good to see you.
bye-bye.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.
Ciao, ciao, ciao.
Do other people want to stay on? Like, I guess you can all stay on. I am going to myself move on, but I will leave leave it open if you would like to continue having any. You can unmute yourself if you want to have conversation among yourselves. Thanks.
But then who will end this? How does it get shut down?
I'll shut it down eventually.
Well, all right, give us a time frame.
Oh, let's say 30 minutes.
All right. Yikes. Okay, that takes us to 12:30 where I am, so. But we should be able to see each other if we're going to talk with each other. Like
Yep,
Evan.
people can turn on their camera and they can unmute themselves if they would like to stay on.
Okay. Say, who wants to talk? Sylvain? Timothy?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to say, I don't know, I've been studying microbiotics for like 30 years, and I knew people, but I think they passed away. And I just wondered, does anybody remember like Geraldine Walker or Stanley Walker, Loren Schroeder? Um, Scott Moses, I think, is still alive. He and Barbara Moses were involved. Do any of those names, and of course, Denny just passed. These were people from around the Philadelphia area. But I missed them, and I never knew what happened to them, except for Denny.
I thought Geraldine Walker was associated with the West Coast macrobiotics. And I was thinking we knew the cause, but I'm going to retract that.
You were thinking about, what were you thinking about?
I was thinking Geraldine Walker was part of the West Coast.
She might have moved, but she was in Philly for a while with her husband was Stanley Walker.
Okay, then I'm thinking of a different Geraldine.
They were wonderful. And you didn't know
all of our friends in this community were our brothers and sisters, even more than our birth family, because the food is what creates our blood and our kinship with each other, in the same way that any indigenous group is unified by diet. And even though we had different ideas about salt, all of us were eating the brown rice. And so we are family and they are akin and we miss them.
Yes. And Murray Snyder, I remember very well. Do you remember Murray?
Murray Snyder and Warren Kramer.
Yes.
Ed Esco and Nishio and Evelyn and Herman and Cornelia and Jinsei Yamazaki. So many of our loved ones are gone.
Yeah. But many of them lived a long, wonderful life.
I personally have gone, my expiration date was supposed to be in the early 1980s. And so it's just a miracle to me that in less than a few weeks I'll be 80. And I never expected even to reach 70. And the thing is, people say, oh, she developed this, this, and this. But the truth is, I wasn't supposed to get close to this time in my life.
That's
so
wonderful.
big credit where it's due.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
Jenny hasn't said anything. Sylvain hasn't said anything. These guys are, no, if we don't talk, it means we're too yin. Hey, Pat, you can talk. Well, if nobody's going to talk, we're not going to use this wonderful half hour that Lenny gave us. Becky can talk. She's here. Christina can talk. Yikes, you guys. You're so silent. How about Barbara? I think we're going to have to give the floor to Lenny and let him shut down this Zoom since
Yeah.
nobody wants to talk.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you read some of the clarifying notes that I put in chat, but my first note to the group was that when Osawa changed yin, he changed potassium into yin, and he changed sodium into yang. And when he did that, he didn't realize that potassium and sodium are not opposite. Both of them are positive ions. Both of them have a valence of 1. Both of them are alkaline and alkaline forming. And when he did it, he was discrediting the basis of his own cure, him stumbling on a used book by Seiga Nishizuka, MD, born 1850, and trained by German allopaths in Western medicine, and he is the one who used Western and analytical tools to verify the difference between the traditional Japanese diet and the modernized version, the rapidly modernizing version of the diet. And what Ishizuka discovered was that the potassium content of the diet was increasing despite the addition of beef, because the sodium content of the diet was decreasing. The beef contained less salt in relationship to potassium than the miso, for which it was being partially substituted. So Osawa basically discredited the basis of his own cure. And when I say cure, I mean he extended his life from like age 18 to age 74. And that's a big deal. And he went on to create huge links between us and the teachings of Ishizuka. And my link was Osawa's disciple, Herman Ihara.
Yeah.
So Osawa created this link and gave me a chance of saving my life using the sodium potassium theory of Ishizuka. And so I praise him. He's one of the teachers for whose soul I pray every day in my meditation. He's one of 6 intimate teachers of mine, though I never met the man. I owe my life to him. But when he went to Europe and he was eating croissants and coffee and rich dinners that his French patrons took him to, and then when he was poor and not being taken out to dinner, he was eating the land snails and foraged greens. His diet was so different than the diet he had practiced during his years with the foundation set up by Ishizuka's students 2 years before his death. Osawa's diet was so different that it scrambled his thinking. And he was trying to read every book in the Sorbonne University Library and the Pasteur Institute Library. He was enrolled in both of those as a special student, and he was teaching acupuncture and flower arranging to the French. And in the context of this confusion of diet and thoughts and trying to speed read and speed write and convey everything he thought he was learning, he just got so mixed up, and he mistook his whimsy for Ishizuka's 20 years of research before he published his first book, listing all of his experiments, giving all of the measurements in tables, showing the potassium sodium content of the different foods. That's in Ishizuka's book, published 1897, the second book. And you know, Herman gives the names of the students of Ishizuka who helped Osawa after he discovered this used book. They helped him to apply the principles and save his life. We know those people existed, but it all got taught. Oh, and we know that Osawa's first book out of these 300 something books was a biography of Sagan Ishizuka, MD. So he paid his dues, he expressed his respect in this bibliography, but then he kind of forgot. And he got this weird idea that something from Chinese medicine was the same as this very carefully proven theory of sodium potassium. And anyway, the whole sodium potassium theory was soundly proven with the discovery of the sodium potassium pump in 1957. And when the people were given the Nobel Prize in 1997 for that discovery and for further elucidation of the sodium potassium pump, millions of them in every body cell of every animal, but the lowest concentrations as you go down towards insects, all of this sodium potassium theory of diet was proven. But the teachers that didn't have English as their first language, they didn't know how to access this information. And Herman asked me to access it for him. And it's been a real catch-up game. I learned everything too late. For instance, with my spine, the curvature of my upper spine, and then the decreased breathing capacity. This I discovered, wow, the discs between the vertebrae, yeah, they're composed of cartilage. And now they found out that cartilage, the fluid in between the cells of the cartilage, contains solids, and the fluid and the solids is called the interstitium, and it contains stored sodium against which the body can draw if the diet is deficient in sodium. And even though I was doing a 1/4 teaspoon salt per dry cup grain for 3 decades, that was way low. That was the starting point. I wasn't I wasn't using my body signals to correct my salt. And then at some point, I actually got infected by this idea that oldsters need less salt. Yeah, that's true. If you're born into a group where you're eating 20 to 40 grams of salt a day, you need less salt starting in middle age because you've stored all of the salt that you need to last you. Only 45% of the body's salt is in the blood, only 45%, and the rest is stored. And the biggest storage, 30%, is in the bone. And then you have storage in cartilage, tendons, and ligaments, firmly documented. And you draw against those savings as you eat a sodium deficient diet, and you lose the function, you lose the presence of the cartilage and ligaments and tendons. Then you lose your bones. That's the last place. They're never ever. The 30% of body sodium in bone is a mandatory constituent of bone. It's never supposed to be touched. And people are now being born with osteoporosis as a result of the teaching that salt is dangerous. And you know what that teaching is. It came from the fact that medicine is a market. They sell a product, they sell products, services, pharmaceuticals, etc. So you know why we got as soon as they got Ishizuka's book, he thought he was writing for people that were dedicated to healing and wanted to know what was wrong with the Western diet. And he didn't realize that as soon as you give them the formula for health, well, he just had no idea who he was dealing with. And so many very innocent teachers have respected experts and respected science and not realized that they're being told in these popular mantras, like salt is dangerous, potassium, you can't get enough. They're not realizing they're being told the opposite of the truth. They're so innocent that they believe, and so that then they teach it.
Sylvia, I don't mean to change the subject, but I have to say that I got really confused at the beginning of the webinar because I think it was Lenny that was saying that as you probably know, or most people know, that Ganat's condition is stable. Now, I don't know what he's what has really been the recent news. So maybe that's why no one's asking questions, is because we're confused what the status is. I'm really confused. I don't know if you know anything.
Other than the fact that she's working with her second incidence of cancer, and that's after the incidence of diabetes. I know no more than that.
Well, the last thing that I had heard from her when she had come on before was that she she was essentially clear that just about everything, all her tests and that she had done, I believe in India, were normal, with just I think small areas on some of her x-rays, but everything was really good and she was really happy. And so I thought everybody was happy, and now maybe something has happened since then. I don't know at all.
Yeah, no, my impression was that something had changed and that had become problematic. And so it's good to know that it's stable. But no,
Well, yeah,
I am not a member of this inside plan for obvious reasons. I have
yeah.
a reputation of being a heretic because I am like a one pony, one pony.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, I just thought I'd put that out there. Everybody was quiet, and I don't know if everybody felt the same way that I did, that, wait a minute, this is confusing. I didn't know of any news one way or the other. So I just really hope for the best. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And if she could tell us, I wish she would, so that we
Yeah.
can give her our best, strongest
Yeah.
wishes.
Yeah. Yeah. That, well, we all really, really care, and we all are really, really rooting for her very much. So.
Oh, Pat, talk, Pat. Your hand's up.
Yeah, I was just figuring out how to unmute myself.
Okay, good.
I love listening to you talk about salt and sodium and chloride and all that, Sylvia. And I like the scientific approach you take to it. I have something very unscientific to say about salt, um, and also a question.
You're not coming through clearly on your audio.
Is the volume too low, or is it
No, that's
breaking up?
okay. It was breaking up. The volume isn't not too low.
Okay. Well, I can't do anything about the breaking up. That has my internet connection very slow.
Well, tell us this thing about salt.
Okay, unscientifically, I've been experimenting with different amounts of salt and trying to use intuition. Like, I have a skillet full of vegetables. They're sauteing, and I'm sprinkling the salt in there, and I'm using intuition to know how much to use. And sometimes when you hit it just right, the food is so incredibly delicious. It's out of this world. You can't even describe how delicious it is. But what I'm wondering is, how do you do the same thing when you're just steaming? I mean, do you put it in the water that you're steaming with, or what?
No. And this is one of the reasons steaming wasn't one of the original procedures that was being taught in early macrobiotics. But how you do it is you have the food in like a ceramic container in the steamer pot, and you toss the food with oil and salt before you steam it. That's one way of doing it. I use steaming for a lot for reheating food very frequently. It's the cleanest way to do it. I use it for baking my bread most of the time, though in the winter, oven baked is wonderful also. But yeah, steaming. Yeah, you have to toss the food with oil and salt like you would before you bake it, but have it in a container, a ceramic container, and let it be cooked by the steam under and rising around it. Okay.
That's great. As far as bread goes, I have quit baking for a long time. I make chapatis on the stove top. They are so much more delicious than bread to me. I mean, it's a totally different way of using flour and dough is to make chapatis.
Chapati is very good, and that is the grain for many ethnic groups. Chapati or a variation of it, like the fermented Ethiopian flatbread. But and that my bread that I make into loaves, which my first baby brother, who's 78, it's his favorite food in the world, and he's not fractionally macrobiotic. But the thing about my bread is it's 50% cooked grain and 50% whole wheat flour, and it's basically a whole grain product more than a flour product, and has a very different energy and moistness and flexibility, elasticity. It holds together differently than a regular flour loaf of bread. That's
Could you, could you do that on the stove top too?
yeah, you can. And you have to be aware that it takes longer rising times and you won't get the lightness that you would get with the traditional flour-based recipes. But yes, you can. I have put it in chapati. My daughter does, she does pancakes for me filled with cooked buckwheat groats. And those are wonderful. And we put the cooked grain because probably 30 years ago, I was, since we need to increase our use of grain, I was going, well, how can we do this? And I came up with so many new ways to use grain, like the millet fillets, the millet fillet. Anyway, but one of them was to increase the use of whole grain in the flour products and make them less dry and mucus forming and problematic, and turn them into something that everybody loves, because grain is the staff of life. People say, give us this day our daily bread, because this is the rice for so many people in the world. For my grandmother's group up in Sweden, it was rye crisp. It was rye bread, but it was bread rather than, and it's the Japanese, they developed ways of carrying whole grain that were almost like bread, but then so did Americans with things like the journey cakes and oat cakes that were, the whole grain or the flaked grain in a form of bread that they could carry with them. And so, yeah, using the whole grain as part of the bread made it so that it was more acceptable to a lot of people. Macrobiotics.
I also wanted to comment. I was looking through the chat early on. Somebody was talking about natto. Yeah, there's special small beans that you can buy, usually from an Oriental grocery. They're smaller, about half the size of a normal soybean. That's what I use for natto.
Yeah, that's good, because the smaller, the more yang. And soybeans were traditionally the bean highest in potassium, lowest in sodium. They were the most yin of the beans. And the Japanese people did not use the soybean plant for anything except animal fodder for centuries and centuries and centuries, until they were taught miso making by the Chinese. And I think it was some time around 700 after Christ, if I remember correctly. They did not use soybeans for anything for humans until they were taught how to use them to make miso and soy sauce. And that's how they used them. And believe it or not, things like tofu In the 1600s in Japan, the townspeople were forbidden to produce tofu. They were forbidden to sell tofu. It was a wasteful product. It contributed to the degeneration of the moral character of the population to eat it and participate in this wasteful, and how to use the refuse from making tofu, the okara, to turn it into burgers or whatnot. It's all problematic. So they were not allowed to make tofu, believe it or not. It was not part of the traditional diet of Japan. When I went to Vega, I don't believe it was served once in a 2-week healing workshop back in 1984. And I'll tell you, tempeh was served once. And I commented on it to the house mother, Sylvia Lowry, because I thought, oh, this is just so wonderful. And she told me she always felt worse after the day when the tempeh was served. And now I completely beyond agree with her. It's not been part of my diet for decades. And I use tofu, like I use it to make a vegan feta cheese, which contains a huge amount of salt and is very healthy. And I use it like twice a year to make tofu broccoli scramble with curry powder and onion and so on. It's a granddaughter's favorite vegan food. But other than that, I personally make no use of tofu.
Well, I think natto is one of the best food serves ever been invented.
It was served once in a 2-week period at Vega, and azuki beans were served once, and they were the only beans in a 2-week healing workshop. So I can tell you that was already a widening of the traditional diet, the traditional healing diet. It had been way tighter, less yin in the 70s and 60s.
Oh, I was there in the 70s, and I can confirm what you're saying.
Yeah.
First time I had natto, I was visiting a Japanese friend in New York City. It was on New Year's Eve, and they traditionally eat natto on New Year's Eve.
Oh yeah, sure. It's a party food. Definitely. And we were served it as a party food, natto, and azuki bean as covering for rice for ohagi, and maybe there was tofu once, but I don't think so. And by the way, even Evelyn Kushi and Wendy Esco, their early cookbooks stated clearly, never, ever, ever combine tofu with fruit or any sweetener. It causes headaches, it causes digestive upset, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was part of traditional teaching, and it's right on. It was never, ever combined with sweets in traditional Japan, tofu.
How long can natto stay in the refrigerator?
About a week.
Because I just bought a dozen, so should most of it be in the freezer?
Yes. Once you thaw it out, it keeps for about a week in the fridge.
And it stays a long time good in the freezer?
Oh yeah, about a year.
Oh, okay. I'll eat it before then.
But it's so easy to make your own tofu. I mean, your own natto. Just when you have the frozen natto and you take it out of the container, put maybe a tablespoon of water in the container and swish it around to clean the sides off, and you get all the natto bacteria in that small amount of water, so it becomes like a slime, and you
Yeah.
suck that up into a small syringe, and then you can freeze the syringe until you're ready to use it as a starter.
Oh,
The way
well,
I do it is
I'm not much of a,
soak the soybeans overnight till they're expanded in size, and then rinse them off all the times, and then steam them until they're soft. And then let them come down to about body temperature. Mix in the starter and put them in a shallow dish, and put a covering over that. It's not airtight. Maybe a sheet of aluminum foil with little holes punched in it, or a cheesecloth that's dampened. and set that in a place where you can keep the temperature at about 108 degrees for 24 hours. I use my oven, which has a pilot light, and together with the pilot light, I use a 40-watt incandescent light bulb inside the oven. If you don't have a pilot light, you could use like a 100-watt incandescent light bulb. If you don't have an oven at all, you can use a cooler, like the kind you take to the beach or a picnic, and put
Yeah.
hot water bottles in there, and just keep changing them as they cool down. And it takes 24 hours, and then you can divide it up into smaller containers and freeze it. It's wonderful, homemade, and so much cheaper than buying it in the store.
Well, yeah, but you can get a cup for just $5, but I guess that's expensive. But I love to eat it, and it's good for your skin too.
It's about the richest source of vitamin K you can find. Vitamin K is absolutely essential, especially as we get older.
Okay. Sylvia, can I ask you 2 questions? Do you ever
Alright.
take magnesium as a supplement?
No. Magnesium is supplied there. It's a requirement of the plant kingdom. It's supplied by the vegetables and sea vegetables and
Okay.
grain and beans.
And have you ever just had like a day where you'll just have one main meal in the afternoon and not really, or do you eat 3 square meals?
No, maybe two. I try for 2, but I have a bad habit based on years where, I mean, decades where I went between anorexia and bulimia. So I have a tendency to forget about eating, and I have a dangerously low body weight. So I really technically should be eating more than 2 meals a day. Sometimes I can't remember. I actually don't remember to eat because of the way my brain has been trained at so many years of trying to fit into a society that valued thin and blonde, so on. So
Yeah.
I'm not a good example. But on the topic of fermented foods, I wanted to encourage more people to experiment with making their own amasaki from grain, cultured. When you can buy the culture, the koji, from Eden Foods, and experimenting with making it from the different grains, including millet and buckwheat and rice and white rice. And the reason this is so important is most people are not eating enough salt to get the maltose and and therefore the glucose out of the grain. And therefore they're attracted to the simple sugars, which don't require digestion. And when you go to simple sugar, the go-to is usually sucrose, half fructose and half glucose. And it's not the glucose that'll hurt you, it's the fructose that is very damaging to the liver and the kidneys and contributes to the uric acid level in the blood and hypertension and so on. So we want to avoid the fructose, which is half of every sugar molecule. And we do this by sourcing our sweetener from grain, with the exception of corn, which is technically a fruit. We source our sweetener from grain, and that is the only way to not get fructose. And you do not want any more fructose than you get when you eat vegetable. All vegetable contain fructose, sucrose, and glucose separately, and you get plenty of fructose, and it's a worry. So that's one of the reasons we don't eat unrestricted amounts of vegetables. And the other reason is potassium, which is an even bigger worry. And it's another reason why we don't eat unrestricted amounts of vegetables or beans or the high potassium foods. Traditionally, the grain was the lowest in potassium, highest in sodium. But anyway, experimenting with making amasaki is just as easy as Pat's description for making natto, and people will be so satisfied by the sweetener they create. And you can cook it down further and make it very thick and use it like as a grain butter on bread, etc. And you won't get any of the nasty side effects that you get from eating coconut sugar, maple syrup, agave, and any of those. And if you don't want to make your own amasaki from millet or buckwheat or rice or wheat or whatnot, then buy the brown rice sweetener and the barley malt sweetener because they're safe. They're not good for people with a yin condition, and everybody's too yin. So I'm not saying eat a lot of the amasaki you make, but it's the way to get your sweet. And this teaching, originally Macrobiotics did not use maple syrup. It was not part of the original cookbook.